The University of York's School of Physics, Engineering and Technology is where big ideas begin. We nurture curiosity and provide opportunities for everyone to explore the world around us, whether that's looking under the microscope or through the telescope. Physicists and engineers unite to develop new technologies to create a sustainable world. From next-generation fusion reactors and autonomous robots to quantum technologies and green energy. Across the campus, we have a range of purpose-built facilities, and we continue to invest in new equipment to support teaching and research. Our curriculum is developed and taught by world-leading experts, designed to give students everything they need to excel in a supportive environment. Through collaboration across the school, we have achieved international recognition for our research. We are driving progress in science and engineering, working together to develop solutions that will positively impact the world around us. Here in the School of Physics, Engineering and Technology, we are shaping the future together in an environment where everyone can thrive.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thanks very much for being with us this evening. My name's Charlie Jeffrey, and I'm the Vice-Chancellor of the University of York. It's a great pleasure to have you here on campus to celebrate the launch of the School of Physics, Engineering and Technology. In a moment, I'm going to be handing over to Kate Ravilius, science journalist, but also one of our local councillors, who's going to chair the main event and introduce you to this fantastic panel of speakers sitting down behind me. But before that, a few words from me about the School of Physics, Engineering and Technology. This is one of 3 new schools we're proud to have opened over the last 18 months, each bringing together groundbreaking combinations of disciplines and subjects in a way that's unique to this university. So in November 2022, we launched the School for Business and Society, which combines and amplifies the university's strengths in responsible business, social policy, social work, and public management to create an environment which will help develop the ethical leaders of tomorrow, and doing that by building on traditions unique to this city, which mesh responsible business with campaigning for social justice. That was followed by the School of Arts and Creative Technologies, which was launched last summer. That school spans music, theatre, film and television, as well as interactive and emerging media, integrating creative practice with cutting-edge teaching, research and external engagement. And in all of those ways, feeding the UK's creative industries, one of our most successful economic sectors. Now, these new interdisciplinary schools are part of the University of York's vision to be a university for public good. Since the foundation of the university 61 years ago, our research across the humanities, social sciences and natural sciences has been intended not just to open up new knowledge through reason, experiment and debate, but also to apply that knowledge for the amelioration of human life and conditions. And the creation of the School of Physics, Engineering and Technology reflects that legacy. Its interests reach from the origins of the universe to product development in the latest technology applications and pretty much everything in between. In bringing together physicists and engineers to push the frontiers of knowledge, foster innovation and meet the grand challenges our society faces, the school's aim is to develop new technologies that work for public good. Whether that's through industry cases that directly translate research into solutions to real-world problems, or through the creative and diverse outreach programs that bring research directly to the public and inspire our next generation of scientists and engineers. I've no doubt you've got or will get a sense of all of this from the exhibition outside in the atrium, which will remain open after the session this evening. So to launch this school, we're honoured to be joined by a fantastic panel of speakers, each outstanding leaders in their fields. And let me say to them how incredibly grateful we are that they have given their time and their enthusiasm to be part of this milestone event for the university. It really is much appreciated. And that's my cue to hand over to Kate. Kate, thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlie, and good evening, everybody. So I'm Kate Revilius, and as Charlie mentioned, I'm an independent science journalist based here in York. I'm really delighted to chair this panel here this evening, and it's fantastic to be here. I've just been out having a look at the exhibition. I've been doing a virtual walk on Mars. I've been learning about where we are with fusion. I've been looking at underwater technology. So it's a really, really exciting space, and I'm delighted to be here. So we'll be exploring and debating technology for the public good, using physics and engineering to solve humanity's key challenges. And joining me this evening are a panel of leaders who will share with us how interdisciplinary working, such as that enabled by the formation of the School of Physics, Engineering and Technology, with its focus on transitional research themes, make us better able to address some of those key challenges. So let me introduce you to our experts. We've got Professor Adam Beaumont, and he's the founder and chairman of Trusted Communications Specialists, AQL, and CEO of Isle of Man-based telecommunications company, Blue Wave. An active angel investor, Adam founded not-for-profit investment platform North Invest, which propels co-investment in tech startups across the north of the UK. Adam started his career in secure mobile networking for an agency of the MOD. His passion for future technology and its positive impact on the economy and society was recognised by the Maserati 100, to which he became a member in 2019. As a devoted environmentalist, he's a trustee of the Eden Project and a non-executive board director of Eden Project International Limited. Adam is also the honorary consul of the Republic of Estonia, championing trade and close relations with the UK. Heba Bevan studied electronics and computer engineering, receiving a first for her final year project on robotics visualization at the University of York. And upon graduation, she worked as an engineer for the microchip design company ARM. Heba went to the University of Cambridge to do a PhD in low-power wireless sensor networks, and it was during her PhD that Heba founded Utterberry. Heba was awarded an OBE in 2018 for her services to innovation, technology, and STEM education. In 2021, Heba won Vodafone Women of the Year Award for Innovation, and she was named top 32 women in tech leaders and top 20 women in data, and named as one of the top 25 most influential women in UK tech. Sir Ian Chapman is a plasma physicist whose focus is on developing fusion as an energy source. He became CEO of UK Atomic Energy Authority in 2016. His research has been recognised with a number of international awards, including the Institute of Physics Paterson Medal in 2013, the American Physical Society Stix Award in 2017, the Royal Society Cavalier Medal in 2019, and the Institute of Physics Glazebrook Medal for Leadership in 2021. He was made a Fellow of the Institute of Physics in 2013, became a visiting professor at Durham University in 2015, elected as a Fellow of the Royal Academy of Engineering in 2022, and made an Honorary Fellow of the Nuclear Institute in 2023. He was knighted in the King's New Year's Honours in 2023. An immersive technology specialist, Jessica Driscoll is the Director of Immersive Technology at Digital Catapult. She has an MA in Digital Culture and Technology, an experience of working with a variety of technologies from virtual reality, augmented reality, and haptics in the creative and industrial sectors. She has implemented immersive training solutions in both educational and commercial institutions, in particular NGOs, oil and gas, aviation, pharmaceutical, construction and automotive industries. Her previous experience at BBC Research and Development gave her understanding and insight into audiences and testing new broadcast technologies at scale. With experience of each part of the immersive value chain, from startups to international broadcaster, from business development to content production, Jessica's hands-on experience helps to shape the support offered for startups and scale-ups in the immersive economy. And Richard Stubbs is Chief Executive of Health Innovation Yorkshire and Humber, working with the NHS, academic partners and health innovators to support the transformation of health and care delivery through innovation. Richard is also chair of the National Health Innovation Network, bringing together all 15 health innovation networks across England to deliver national impact. Richard chairs the advisory board for Sheffield Hallam University's Advanced Wellness Research Centre, a 14 million research institution established to develop innovations that will improve population health and physical activity, and is a visiting fellow at the university. Since June 2021, Richard has been chair of the NIHR Children and Young People's MedTech Cooperative MedTech and In Vitro Diagnostics Cooperatives Steering Group, the only dedicated paediatric NIHR MIC. In 2021, Richard was recognised as Business Leader of the Year in the Yorkshire Post prestigious Excellence in Business Awards. He's a Fellow of the Royal Society of Arts and a Leadership Fellow of St George's House, Windsor Castle. So, we've got a fantastic panel here. The discussion will begin with a short 5-minute pitch from each of our panellists, and we'll then engage in a short panel discussion, and then I will open up to questions from the floor. So, I am delighted to hand over to Adam, first of all. Adam, welcome.
Okay, well, thanks, Kate. Are we going to sit here? Or yeah, okay, perfect. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Adam. As Kate said, I'm the chair of a bunch of telecoms companies. That doesn't sound very exciting, does it? Like we're all here because being close to a university makes you feel younger, and it does make you younger, and it makes your brain younger as well. The reason I'm excited about being in such a dull industry as telecoms is because very early on we decided we weren't going to connect people, we were going to connect things, and then we decided actually the world this area of technology is so huge, we're not just going to connect things, we're actually going to connect the companies that connect the things. So I've got the real privilege of being the sort of the innovator enabler engine behind pretty much probably half of the projects in this country that needs some kind of communication as part of that effort. Whether that's in quantum, whether that's in the Internet of Things, whether that's in 5G, whether that's in satellite. So things that we do that we don't particularly shout about. Is this going out to the internet? Probably, that's fine. So we also build things like, for example, the satellite earth stations for SpaceX, for their Starlink project, across the UK, across Europe, across the Africas. So what I have and my team have is the privilege of having a ringside seat to see what cool technology is out there and what's accelerating, and to spot the singularities. And this is why initiatives like to have physics, engineering, and technology together is really impactful, because it's when you start to harness singularities that you really make things go faster. So, for example, two singularities that are quite exciting, which happened moderately recently, there was a guy called Professor Peter Lawrenson, electrical engineering at Leeds. He developed the switch reluctance electric motor. So what? Well, that's the motor that allows accurate or positional accuracy, which became the motor that drives a lot of the robotics industry. Also, very nearby, over the side of the Pennines, there was a lot of breakthroughs in materials tech. And suddenly, you've got printable polymers. Suddenly, bring together positional accuracy and printable polymers, and you've got 3D printers. And suddenly, the whole additive industry was born. So looking at multidisciplinary innovation is super important. And I'll give you another example. So I'm a trustee of the Eden Project. And when I joined, this was about 7 or 8 years ago, there was a project we kept trying to unlock, and we knew it was a good idea. And it was to dig the UK's first deep geothermal well. It was the first one the first deep geothermal project in the UK for over 40 years. Excuse me. And everyone was kind of really struggling to sign on the line. I read a book in 1984 by a chap called John Elkington, explaining why deep geothermal was a good idea, and actually why nuclear was a good idea, and how this all fits together, as a singularity. And the piece that was missing from people's understanding was this incredibly expensive hole in the ground. If you dig down 5 kilometers through what was the Cornubian basalt, which is granite, you'll meet an awful lot of heat, and this is stable, renewable base load energy, which will serve you for 20 to 30 years, silently. But we were struggling with cost, and what they didn't understand was the singularity. So there was a decrease in the demand for deep drilling for the oil industry, which reduced the cost, but also there was massive advances in materials science and artificial diamonds. And a lot of that technology is actually coming from the north and from Teesside. So the cost of deep geothermal drilling comes down and down. So when we signed on the dotted, it was a petrifyingly expensive project. By the time we came around to actually implement it, which has taken a number of years, and this was last year, it's cost a fraction of that. And the impact is huge. So we have to really look at initiatives such as this department to bring together thinkers from completely different parts of science to come together. I think part also of what we were briefed to talk about was innovating in a difficult environment. And I think we've all done this. And as a tech startup in Leeds 25 years ago, I can say that was a difficult environment. And it was difficult because there wasn't access to skills. There wasn't access to investment. There wasn't access to mentorship. That was a difficult environment in its own right. The journey that I've been on has been really quite interesting because our headquarters are in Leeds. By rights, we should have been in London. We built our technology in Leeds because I wanted to start my life here, my family here. And we were really keen to see how we could build that ecosystem. And to build a strong ecosystem, you don't just need innovation, you also need entrepreneurism, because entrepreneurism is the commercialization of innovation. And unless you get that virtuous cycle, you don't get to do any more innovation because the money doesn't cycle back. So when I used to be a university lecturer in the 90s, commercial research was a dirty word. And what's really great now is to see that this is completely the opposite. So I think that's my 5 minutes. So excited to be here, excited to answer questions, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Hiba.
Good evening. I hope everybody can hear me. I'm Hiba Bevan. I used to study in this university, and I'm an electronics and computer engineer. So I don't know if it's by any means slightly a geek, but I remember that Professor Andy Turrell, during my first year, he told me, oh, there is a company called ARM. You must apply to it. You might be good for that sort of things. So I became a CPU engineer during my undergrad, before I finished. And I remember Andy laughing at me when I used to say, oh, now finish my first year, I'm a third of engineer, finish my second year, I'm two-thirds, third year, it's like I'm an engineer. And he used to say, which third is that? But one of the things which is, I think, great in, and I think in York, and what York does really, really well, having the student to actually have a hands-on on real projects. It's from outside what we could see as well, and the type of research. And currently I run Atterbury, which is a spin-out out of Cambridge University during my PhD. So during my PhD, worked on very small sensors, edge computing, and we monitored one of the most trickiest infrastructure in the world, Crossrail, Tideway, Singapore, Java tunnels, MTRs in Hong Kong, and currently we are monitoring the biggest tunnels constructed in Australia. And these projects is very, very tricky because we have to predict any collapse, any kind of deformations that has happened. So what we built is a real-time system that gives us a warning and a good, that might be few weeks, it might be few days of warning, and what that kind of constraint that we have to do during the build, and what the kind of decision we need to make and change part of that proactive approach. So communication is not boring. No, I don't agree with that. I think communication is very important. Wireless. I hate wires. I think we should be everything is wireless. Unfortunately, we're not there yet. And I think one of the things which is great to see the physics and the engineering department getting together to have some sense of really, really early scientific approach to it, and deploying that very quickly into engineering to something more practical. As an engineer, we make things happen, but we base everything on science, and we need the physics to that. And I hope I didn't take that long. And thanks very much for having me here.
Thank you. Ian.
Right, Adam and Heba have been super positive, so I'm going to take it upon myself to depress you for a minute. I don't think I need to convince you that climate change is a big issue and we need to deal with it, but let me just put it into facts and figures. Some really key facts which I think, well, they really depress me. Let's see if they depress you. Today, societally, whole of the world, energy demand, not electricity, we burn about 11 gigatons of oil. So that's 11,000 megatons of oil, right? I'll define what a megaton of oil is in a minute. 2050, we want to get to net zero by 2050, right? Everybody says, we'll get to net zero by 2050. What does that actually mean? It means, for sure, you've got to get rid of 11,000 megatons of oil, and you've got fewer than 11,000 days to do it. There's about 9,500 days till 2050. So that means you've got to get rid of a megaton of oil every year, even if demand didn't go up, even if demand was flat, which it won't be. But even if it was, you've got to get rid of a megaton of oil every day. And a megaton of oil is like Hornsea, the biggest offshore wind farm in the world, or Sizewell, the biggest nuclear power station in this country. So you've got to build one of them every single day for 30 years. Not going to do that, right? So how are we doing on that journey? So surely we get rid of coal first. Let's get rid of coal. That'll be easy. Well, there's about 2,500 coal power stations in Asia today. We've got 300 odd months till 2050. That means, roughly speaking, we've got to close 8 coal power stations per month, right? To get to, surely we've got to get rid of the coal to get to net zero by 2050. 8 per month. Last year, we built an extra 2 per month. Not close 8 a month, we built an extra 2 per month, right? So that's not great. Well, surely we'll just do loads of PV, right? We'll do loads of solar. We'll put solar all over Africa. The Netherlands. You wouldn't say the Netherlands is a country with either a lot of land or a lot of sunshine. Today, there is more PV installed in the Netherlands than the entire continent of Africa, by a factor of 2, actually. I mean, those things depress you, right? They depress me. So, you know, sustainable energy is such an existential thing for our society, and we're not doing a great job on it. We're really not. Which is why we think fusion is really important, because if we can make fusion work, of course it's low carbon, and sustainable, but it works in all jurisdictions. You no longer need a load of natural resource or stuff you dig out the ground. Everybody can do it. It doesn't take up a lot of land. So it's, you know, it would be a huge advantage to this decarbonisation journey that we're not doing a great job on. So that's why we work in fusion. Fusion is really tough. It's really, really hard. One of the grand challenges of society, I think. And the reason that it's hard is that it brings together lots of challenges. So our fuel, which is a type of hydrogen, we take to about 150 million degrees. It's about 10 times hotter than the center of the sun. And as you can imagine, it's quite unstable at those temperatures. So there's a whole load of complicated physics about how you contain a fuel at that temperature. Then we hold that using giant magnets, which are cryogenically cooled to 4 Kelvin. So you've gone 10 times hotter than the sun to almost absolute zero in the space of 2 meters. It's a big, big challenge, how you deal with heat gradients like that. Then it would be the most intense neutron source on the planet. So how those neutrons then affect the materials that you build the machine from, that's a big challenge. Then we have to store and process our hydrogen fuel. That's also really hard. You have to make it, and then it's hydrogen. It's really light. It wants to escape and permeate through everything. So how you control it and manage your inventory is really, really difficult. And then you need to robotically maintain the whole thing because it gets temporarily. It's a pretty unforgiving environment. You can't send people in there. So it needs some big, complex robots. Now, that actually makes it quite fun to work on that challenge because you've got all of these interdisciplinary relationships to deal with. And that's why I'm so excited about the creation of this school, because our problems are physics and engineering and technology brought together. And so that's exactly what this does. We're sort of at the nexus of our fuel is hydrogen, so you'd say that's sort of chemical processing, oil and gas. We have to deal with really extreme heats, that's kind of aerospace. We work in vacuum, that's kind of the space sector. We produce a lot of neutrons, that's kind of the nuclear sector, and we are at the nexus of that, and that's why schools like this, which deliberately are setting out to be interdisciplinary, are so important for tackling the challenges that we face. And so York has always been a great supporter of fusion, and therefore fusion will always be a great supporter of York. Thanks.
Thank you.
Wow.
Jessica.
I'm not sure if I can follow that. So we've had very positive, we've had slightly dystopian worrying, and my theme that I was tasked with is engineering the metaverse. So I think there's a lot of disagreement about what the metaverse is. You know, what does it mean? Is it something that you put a headset on for? Is it augmented reality? Is it the digital world? Is it part of the physical world? And the answer that I think, it's all of these things. And it's schools like the PET that are going to help with interoperability. They're going to help with cross-disciplinary working. They're going to help students leave here and understand what it's like to work in an organisation like mine. So I work for a company called Digital Catapults. We have, my area of expertise is immersive technology, but we have other technology areas, namely 5G, IoT, AI, distributed ledger technology, and more latterly quantum. So lots of pieces of the previous speakers' technology stacks are all present at Digital Catapult. And, you know, what does it take to really solve these problems? It's a lot of convergence and it's a lot of understanding about the different technology areas and how they can work together in something like the metaverse. So I think that I started living in the metaverse in, I think, 2006. So some of you in the audience might remember a program called Second Life, which was a little bit like Sims for adults. So we created an English school to help people understand how to speak English in extreme situations, for example, in a nuclear power station, on an oil rig. And putting them in under that extreme pressure in that simulation really helped them to understand, A, what they could and couldn't do, but B, you know, what was the human aspect of this? You know, how do you really develop those skills within a virtual environment that you can use in a real environment? And I think that the idea of digital twinning, so some of you might be familiar with that word, you know, a digital replication of a physical object that, you know, it can interact in real time and take some of the data, for example, that Heather was talking about. Those things are really difficult, and you wouldn't, you know, it's not the technology. All of the technology exists. It's all of the regulatory policy implications and the people. It's the confidence to say, okay, I'm going to share some of my data with you. I'm going to try a different workflow, or I'm going to build some plumbing that fits my operation with your operation. So Digital Catapult are going to be opening a National Digital Twin Centre with partners in Northern Ireland, and it will be really exciting to collaborate with the PET on this project and, you know, figure out what this kind of technology for public good is in relation to digital twin. We've collaborated a lot with various parts of the PET before on really exciting creative projects. So a company called Metaverse, who has been grown in the region and supported and incubated by XR Stories. We've helped them to kind of move on and tap into our national network and international network. And it's been great to see a creative company in the region doing really interesting work with a lot of the technologies that have been mentioned already today. And we're really interested in what unique and interesting things place-based innovation can bring. What's special about this region, and how can Digital Catapult help the PET to connect it with other parts and other ecosystems in different parts of the UK. Another thing that we've been concentrating on at Digital Catapult is responsible technology and responsible AI. What are the ethics around the metaverse? What are the ethics around digital twins? What are the ethics around using generative AI in a creative space? How can SMEs understand what that means? How can a micro business really start to understand how they can utilize tools that will really help save them time and money? But what does it really mean for them? So it would be great also to work with the PET on the responsible technology angle as well. And then lastly, on the regulatory angle, we've been working with the Digital Regulation Cooperation Forum, which is Ofcom, the CMA, and several other regulators, to really think about regulation, because everybody's heard about the Online Safety Bill. How does that translate to the metaverse? People have thoughts about how social media might be affected, but when you move into digital spaces which are regulated from other countries, and you have very visceral experiences, maybe with an Apple Vision Pro, you feel very embodied. How do you regulate for that, and how do you help people to understand what those steps would be? So we're also going to be working on the Spatial Computing Regulation Network with Damien and team as well, to kind of really explore those themes and work on a kind of framework and how we can recommend what should be next to government and also to the rest of the ecosystem. So yeah, really, really honoured to be here and very, very excited to continue engineering the metaverse. Thank you.
Last but not least, Richard. Thank you, everyone. That's, 4 hard acts to follow. Also, University of York former student. In fact, this is a very auspicious time for me, because for those of you who have been here long enough to remember the old Langwith College before it got taken over by Derwent, which still hurts, actually. I spent my 1 year on campus in what I think was C block or D block. It got demolished the year that I moved into town. So we're probably yards away from my very formative years. In fact, I probably recognise some of the ducks that were walking past earlier. I didn't get off to ARM. I spent most of my 3 years running University of Radio York, but so not quite the academic ladder that my parents probably envisaged, but it was a great time. Adam talks about innovating in a difficult environment. Let me talk to you about the NHS. Yeah, Ian, 4 times hotter than the sun? You try getting a consultant to look at a smartphone as a remote diagnostic tool and accept it as something that can replace, the clinical hands-on care. So my job is to run the innovation arm for the NHS. That's a culture job. It's about how do you actually get people to do things differently tomorrow that they weren't doing today? How do you get them to sustain that and embed that into their practice? How do you get them to trust you that the things you're inviting them to take on are the things that are better for patient care, better for efficiencies, better for UK wealth and growth often, and better for the NHS as a whole? It's a job that requires me to create nothing, which if any of my PPE lecturers were here, they'd say, what's changed? But the reason is because actually we're great in this country at discovery science. In the NHS, what we're absolutely terrible at is spread and adoption. And one of the reasons for that is we don't put enough effort and thinking into how something spreads and is therefore organically adopted from place to place, site to site, in our R&D thinking. And that's often because people work in silos. So a lot of my job, which I think is one of the best jobs in the NHS, but I very grandly refer to myself as knitter-in-chief for Yorkshire, because actually I have the kind of headspace to be able to bring people together, to break down borders and barriers and break down silos and try and find meaningful conversations with my convening power to get people who are unknowingly working on the same challenges, sometimes from different lenses through different doors, but working on the same challenges in parallel to each other without knowing that each other exists. And I think that's particularly true in the NHS. We're very fond, I think, in the NHS of thinking that all our answers must be within the four walls of our known universe, and actually not thinking about what are the other doors, often in our same place, in York or in Sheffield and Leeds, that we should be knocking on to find help, support, advice, partnership that's actually going to help us to go together towards our meaningful joint ambition. So obviously you'll see why I'm so fond of this school and its ambitions, because I don't think that innovation can be done in silos. Innovation is a team sport, and I think that's particularly true in healthcare. Just a quick word on why I think health innovation is so important right now. We talk a lot about the challenges the NHS faces. Actually, existentially, we're not going to get ourselves out of our current state by growing more clinicians, by creating 200 more hospitals in the next 2-3 years. What we are going to do is look at innovation and the opportunities it brings as solutions or supporting solutions to our workforce crisis, to our funding crisis, to our elective backlog in a post-pandemic environment, to look at some of our ambitions around net zero and to look at our ageing population. Innovation has to be the way that we tackle those challenges, and innovation is part of our toolkit to working on those challenges. Just wanted to, I suppose, finish with a few kind of vignettes of some future thinking, because I'm very keen that we think about health innovation, not just in terms of what it can do for now, but actually where we're going as a system and what healthcare of the future might look like. But if you think about Sarah, she's got anemia as a result of chronic kidney disease. And instead of having to cancel a family day out due to having to attend a hospital appointment, she can then use a self-test her hemoglobin levels at home using an app that lets her record and send those results to the healthcare practitioner. The healthcare practitioner and the record get her results. Sarah goes off and has her day out with her family. You can think about Dr. Mansour. In the future, he's got a patient in front of him whose symptoms could be indicative of cancer, but he's not quite sure. So he sends the patient's blood samples to an NHS pathology lab where a machine learning algorithm produces a calibrated probability of cancer. Dr. Mansour is able to rule out his patient from being at high risk, and the patient is able to go about his day. Just as importantly, we're able to free up vital, urgent capacity for those people who unfortunately don't have the same diagnosis. And then think about John. He's 75 years old. He's going to struggle with heart disease and age-related issues. He's got a robot who's going to guide him through a personalised physical therapy plan by projecting movement directions onto the floor of his home and combine those with audio prompts. That allows him to maintain his independence at home. It also reduces his chance of falls and positively impacts his personal safety. His friend Eddie also has a robot that helps Eddie to manage his Parkinson's disease. And Eddie's wife, Joan, she has a robot as well that assists her with her cognitive impairment. You probably know where this is going. This isn't the future. All these things are available now within the NHS. In fact, all these things are happening and made here in Yorkshire. So the future's here, it's just not evenly distributed. But we've really got to think about not just how we solve today's problems, but how we use schools like this to create solutions that are going to help us solve tomorrow's problems. The NHS in 25 or 30 years' time has to look radically different to the NHS of today. If it doesn't, I don't believe we'll be able to afford it. So we've really got to think about healthcare innovation as absolutely a key plank to not just sustaining the NHS, but having it thrive for the future. So as I said, innovation's a team sport. And so it's down to initiatives like this one here at the school about how we're going to have that collaborative engagement, which are going to foster greater, more powerful interventions. I'd like you to all think about spread and adoption. I know everyone's really, really keen to do great research. Everyone's really, really keen to publish. We've got to think about translation, and you've got to think about how things go from one site to the next. The cultural barriers to that in healthcare are significant and real. And if we don't bake in that thinking from the outset, then we'll always be fantastic at invention, but not very good at adoption. Thank you.
So, thank you all. I've had my mind really expanded in so many different directions, and I'm feeling actually really heartened by a lot of what I've heard, despite the challenges that we face. But one of the things, as Charlie said earlier, I'm also a local councillor here in York. I was elected in May and thrown myself into this crazy world of politics and government and realised that sometimes the hurdles are not that we don't have the solution, but it's really hard to implement them. The way our society is structured can sometimes be as much of the hurdle as actually knowing the solution. And so I suppose there's lots of different stakeholders. There's government, there's industry, there's academia, there's charities. So my question to each of you is, how do we make sure that we work across all of those sectors and that we can work, I mean, all of these sectors often work on different timescales, so how do we manage to integrate together? So we're bringing together different academic disciplines, but how do we then integrate into all the different stakeholders in society so that that solution actually starts to roll out and gets through the nitty-gritty of government and everything else? So who would like to? Adam.
Happy to start.
Go for it.
So last night, I attended the launch of the Centre for Safe Autonomy here on campus. And for me, that's, again, this is quite an interesting thing. So I actually met my wife through technology. I actually met my wife through the Estonian embassy. So she was bringing an Estonian startup to the UK, which was founded by the founder of Skype. And it's a company called Starship. And Starship are one of the most autonomous companies in the world. They've done over 4 million autonomous deliveries of groceries from local stores to people's houses. And this is rolling out across the Baltics and across Scandinavia. At the moment, it's rolling out across the whole of Finland. Trying to roll that out here is a whole separate challenge. She's going to kill me if this goes online, but it's fine. So the challenges are several-fold. And one of the things that we tend to struggle with in this country is if there are no rules and no law, it's almost seemed unlawful. So to roll out robots, you can see that it's great for communities. It's great as an innovation piece. It also drives the city's aspirations as to how you could embrace autonomy. And these are the first baby steps. However, you have silos in government. So you have bays, and you have communities, which includes planning, and you have transport. And so suddenly you have these separate silos that it's incumbent on the business community, the private sector, to try and lobby and to spend time in London, spend time at Parliament, and to try and bring some of this together. But we need to change the risk appetite for innovation. So where we've managed to roll out, nothing to do with me, where these robots have managed to roll out in the UK, it's where local councils have actually said, you know what, there's no rules related to this. There's nothing to say no, and we're up for it. So there's a whole stepwise approach that needs to happen. But we need to make sure that we spend more time rather than sort of asking for permission, begging for forgiveness.
Right, watch out for... Great. Anyone else want to answer that one? Yeah. Jessica.
I completely agree with what you said, but I think that we also need to do that on a much more kind of grassroots and practical level. So those changes need to be made. But I think that having programs where innovation can be de-risked and larger enterprise can work with SMEs and with universities to really kind of do applied research and create something that can be adopted quite quickly, and having that support around it. So not just for the duration of the program or building the POC, but a little bit further on, to your point, how do you really get that adopted? I think that's really important to have that done in tandem. Otherwise, if those big changes are made, then the people on the ground aren't ready to receive them. So I think that having that in tandem approach is really important.
Just very quickly, we did, during the pandemic, obviously a fascinating time for innovation in the NHS, and I did a bit of research around, as it was happening, to understand what are these conditions that are allowing this absolute acceleration and transformation of our pathways. And probably I was more interested in which ones of those are perhaps sustainable in a non-pandemic time? Because obviously a lot of those things were of the time. You know, we had a blank check from Treasury. I don't think there'll ever be another time, hopefully there'll not be another time, when every single resource in the public sector was focused on one single ambition. But actually there were some things that should be nurtured and should be sustained and weren't particularly specific to the pandemic. And they're simple things, but the visibility of leadership and the permissive nature of leadership was an absolute factor during the pandemic. The way that we empowered our staff to make grown-up decisions without constantly having to look up the chain to get permission to act. And actually, the way that the risk appetite just changed. Because all of a sudden, even though we've always talked about a burning platform in the NHS, it was a burning platform. It was Ian's level of heat, for once, rather than that kind of, you know, just one modest sun level of heat. So you had to, status quo was no longer an option. And everyone jumped. And when you had that position there, it just changed the risk appetite and therefore operational decisions that were made because status quo was no longer safe. So I'm not saying that we should make that burning heat, you know, present in everyday life, but certainly that point around how do we mindfully change our appetite to risk and recognise how much that allows us, or at a moment, prevents us from saying yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's interesting because so many of our bigger problems, we don't have the burning heat. Climate change is there, but it's always further away on the horizon, isn't it? So it's how do we make it so present is an interesting thought. Yeah.
Just building on that, I won't tell you who to save them, but a very senior person in government said to me that the best way to get things done is to set it on fire, because then the service actually responds and works really well, and delegated authority actually happens. But you have to wait for a crisis. So, you know, they were deliberately making things into a crisis to make them happen.
I think if there's challenges that it can't be solved, and you put engineers in a situation, and two aspects of it, how to bring different stakeholders on board for a problem. So, for example, Crossrail, it took us 5 years to be approved by Network Rail to use our devices. And a Crossrail, it was embedded in 80 stations. And when I say embedded, we actually prevented these stations to close down, which is meant for London Underground, £11 million per station per week. So you multiply that by 52, that is over £500 million of saving. That is on each station, and we did some of the stations like Moorgate, Liverpool Street. They were over 5 years. And if you look the way it is, because the Atterbury was an R&D that was deployed straight away on a real project, it kind of changed and evolved to what actually that project needs the system to do. Rather, you're designing something and you think, oh, well, it must do this and that, but you're not satisfying what actually the problem, what it needs. So I think R&D need to be really embedded from day one with these problems and solving these issues. The other thing is we worked with DCMS on a project for farmers, and we dealt with farmers, which is, we didn't think they have farming has been done for, you know, millions of years, basically. It's probably the things which is always a human sought out is food. So this is being, you know, it's there, but their challenge is actually growing from peptidizing, from having soil that is nutrient, to having less people actually in that industry. How can you solve CO2 crisis and net zero crisis into that? And we've seen it currently in a lot of media in terms of France and Germany, what's going on around their farmers and how to contain it. And that, how can we use technology to actually solve these problems and using certain facilities. Like one of the things what we did with the farms, they got their machinery stolen. So we had sensors to tell them exactly where their machine, how much vibration, if you're even by yourself in the farm, if there is something wrong happening, a warning system. It could go to the police directly. It tells you which part of where your sheep when do they exit, when they come in, have they been peptidized or not, when they're lambing, and all these kind of things makes it easier to maintain it in a different way. But we need to think differently and we need to adapt. And unfortunately, yes, NHS is really massive, but I think it needs to get the R&D and utilize the digital at an early stage, because it is a big problem currently.
So just to say to everyone, I'm going to hand over to questions from you in 1 minute, and there'll be people with roving mics. So when we hand over to that, I'll ask you to wait for a mic to get to you. But I'm going to ask one more question first, and then be thinking of what you'd like to ask, because we'll send some people around with mics. So my question to all of you now is, we've sort of touched on some of the big problems and the things that we're facing, but how do we know what we're missing and what the unknown unknowns are, and how do we make sure that we are prioritizing the right problems now?
Wow, big question.
Shall I start again?
Yeah, go for it.
Good luck.
That's why I thought I'd go first, you see, because it's only going to get more difficult. And just back to what you were saying about net zero. So I was lucky or unlucky enough to write part of the net zero policy for the MOD. Obviously, the MOD, big landowner, use a lot of vehicles. We send a lot of stuff into the sky that burns a lot of fossil fuels. And there was a massive focus on net zero, this massive focus on 2030, we must be net zero. And if you take a step back from it, what you're really saying is, okay, we're in a bad state now. We're bad. We're going to become less bad up until the point where 2030 comes. And at that point, we're not going to be bad at all, but we're not going to be good. And then you start to get thinking, well, actually, what do we do to become good after that? And the answer is no, start earlier. You need to be doing the interventions that become more good at the same time as the things you're doing to make things less bad. Okay, you with me? So essentially, less bad, for example, is reduction. So reducing things, reducing consumption, optimization, efficiencies. The more good is step changes in how you do them. So completely different technologies, completely different ways of working. So that's the more good. And they can both go along in parallel. But we keep talking about net zero. And when you start to say net zero and then what, people look at you in a little bit of a blank way. So I think one of the things that is missing is the and then what.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So yeah, phasing things and breaking it down and not just focusing on the end goal is really important.
Yeah. So there's multiple technologies that need to run at the same time, and some are doing more good, some are just reducing the bad stuff. So bringing in fusion, more good, reducing coal, less bad. For example.
Yeah, I think I've got an answer to this. I was going to say what Adam said, but no, I think I've got something, which is so my healthcare journey, I guess, is, as a long-standing, 20-year-plus person in the NHS, you get conditioned to think about the NHS is responsible for your health, rather than your healthcare and your sickness. And I think if you asked me 10, 15 years ago, wave a wand in Yorkshire, wave a wand in Sheffield, where I live, what's the best you can do? I'd have talked about new hospitals, I'd have talked about more GP practices, I'd have probably talked about, whatever. Then I kind of stumbled across this thing called our Local Enterprise Partnership. I became the chair of the Local Enterprise Partnership, became responsible for economic growth around South Yorkshire. That was really interesting to me because I started to see everything that they did and that we were spending money on through that LEP as a health mission. And actually, I was the only health person in the room, and I wasn't supposed to be there for health. It was a complete accident. Just walked into the wrong room one day. And now when you ask me, what's the best thing that we can do for health in Sheffield, I'll say jobs. That is the most fundamental thing we can do for our healthcare in Sheffield is create more high-value jobs. And actually, the way that we can create more high-value jobs the fastest in Sheffield is to have better rail links to Leeds and to Manchester, because those are where the jobs are right now, while we create our own. So actually, I don't know if it's quite answering your problem, but I guess I suppose it's my journey of thinking I know the boundaries of what better healthcare looks like, and then recognizing by walking into all these different rooms that actually a better trained service is probably better than more GP practices.
Interesting. Yeah. Fascinating. Anyone else with any answers?
Sure. So I'll speak from a creative industry standpoint and talk a little bit about imagined futures, because I think that, I really think that we need to make an immersive visualization of the crisis that you just talked about, and to really help people to understand what those numbers look like, because you illustrated it very well, but if you read that on a page, it's gone. Yeah. And how do you use tools from the creative industries, practices from media and entertainment to help people to really understand what these issues are and to kind of get buy-in socially and get people to move forward together. I watched a little video on Instagram the other day of Arthur C. Clarke sat next to a little boy, and he was saying, well, in the year 2001, everyone will have a computer in their home and you'll be able to talk to the computer. And it must have sounded very, very fanciful in 1974, but look where we are in 2023. I probably won't need to be here next year. I'll just make a metahuman of myself and beam it in, and then I can just sit and drink tea. But, on a serious note, that kind of idea of imagined futures and using those techniques to really think about what could be, what should be, where do we want to be, where do we want to go, and helping people to co-create those so they feel part of it. So to your point about jobs, what jobs do people want to see, where do they see their lives going, and having those futures. And also foresighting, especially with skills, what things are we going to need in 5 years' time to help to solve those problems, or 10 years' time. It's that and what. So, okay, we've achieved net zero. What else do we need to be? What other skills do we need to train people for?
So scanning the horizon for what's next, yeah. Good. Any thoughts?
Those answers are much better than anything I had, so pass.
I would say carbon capture. We need to actually get, fossil fuel takes millions and millions of years to create it. We are recreating diamonds right now. Why can't we get carbon capture and recreating fossil fuel? So that's a very kind of way for R&D. So we just need to go back to physics and change things the other way around.
That's a really complicated thing, because then you're questioning the whole existence of capitalism, right? Because we could probably do carbon capture, but nobody wants to buy it. It's too expensive. So.
Yeah, well.
Right, let's not start questioning capitalism right now.
That's the wrong panel.
Too big. Okay, I'm going to look out here. Has anybody got anything they would like to ask? You want to put your hand up. Okay, I've got a gentleman over here. We've got a microphone.
Coming down the stairs.
We'll run around. The gentleman in the blue shirt just over here.
He works for me, so he can't ask me a question.
I think he would.
Yeah, full disclosure, I'm part of Team Fusion. And also, I thought of this question before you told me not to question capitalism. Innovation is great and technology is great, and bringing technology to market and to bear on society is absolutely certainly the role of SMEs and industry, and fantastic, and schools like this clearly have a massive role to play in that. In government business cases, public good is a market failure. And so my question is, how do you create, in the way that we do this now and in the future, how do you create systems where that happens for the public good without sustained intervention, without requiring big government contracts ad infinitum? What's the kind of secret there to doing that really, really well?
Good question. Okay, who's prepared to tackle this?
I'm looking at Ian for this.
I mean, what you're describing is an advert for autocracy, actually, Nick. It's the government process and where value is created and benefit accrued in the accounting system that the Treasury use is quite Byzantine, and you have to sort of understand it in order to be able to do the right thing, to be able to do technology for the public good. Right, unfortunately the system is a bit broken for that. That's why, slightly tongue-in-cheek, I say autocracy is better at that, because it thinks long-term. It doesn't think electoral cycles. How do we do that better? Well, that's a really complicated question that I don't have an answer to.
I think it's, how we count impact. So, for example, Digital Catapult have certain KPIs, as everybody does, jobs created and this and that and the other. But a lot of the soft and social impacts are incredibly difficult to capture.
And
they take long-term, and also you can't put it into any of these reports,
Yeah.
so then nobody knows about it. So how do we quantify and capture those soft impacts which are for public good?
That's a good point, yeah. Adam?
This is a really tricky one. I mean, I can... The lifting of lids as to how you can get, for example, stakeholders to work better with each other. I spent a bit of time on the board of the LEP as well, and you get to kind of have that hypervisor, on society, local society, and you get to hear a lot of their kind of challenges and gripes. And I'll share one of mine. So I'm part of being a telco. A necessary evil is we build data centres. Some of them big, some of them small, some of them in the middle of a field. But we've got quite a few in Leeds, and we use about 3 megawatts of electricity. One of the things that I really want to be able to do is to donate the waste heat, because first law of thermodynamics can't be created or destroyed, it can go somewhere else. So your 3 megawatts coming in turns into 3 megawatts of heat. I want to give that to the city to help solve fuel poverty. That's taken a 10-year lobbying cycle, and hopefully we should export the first heat in the next 6 months, for example. But do you remember the Carlsberg advert? Was it Carlsberg when they were digging up the road? Or have I got my beer wrong? Or was it Heineken? And they dug up the road, and there was a water main leaked. And somebody else with a day-glove vest on said, "Oh, while you've got the road dug up, can we put in an electricity cable, or can we put in a telecoms cable?" So again, how we start to get a view as to what a city wants, and all the stakeholders, and actually start to get them to work in sympathy with each other is something that that's my dream. I want to be able to solve fuel poverty. It's my waste. I'm actually throwing it out. It's part of I guess embracing circularity, and that's something I don't think we quite step up to.
Yeah, that's really... I was just having a conversation today about taking advantage of roadworks and using it as an opportunity. So, yeah, thank you. You've played into my hand there. Excellent. Any other ideas on... There's a lady with a red jumper here, and then I'll come to the lady up there.
Thank you very much. As a scientist myself, I'd be extremely interested in your thoughts on the quotation I'm going to give, and then what you would do about it if there's truth in it. It's from Gus Speth, an American climate advocate. I used to think the top global environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought that with 30 years of good science, we could address these problems. But I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with these, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation. And we scientists don't know how to do that.
Interesting. Okay, so...
How you bake that into this absolutely wonderful group.
How do we recognise the real problems?
We're back to capitalism, aren't we?
The problem is because most of the research and funding, it has to fund something which makes money. And unfortunately, if something that it might reduce certain aspects of another pot which is taking money, that would be stopped. So I think it's true, definitely. But as a science, they need to solve the problem. And in most of us, we try to do good. And we say we're doing good. But the thing is sometimes we don't actually think long-term enough that what we are doing it might be actually harmful, not just to ourselves, to our surrounding and our environment.
I think part of that as well is about incentives and different kinds of incentives. You know, how do you incentivize people apart from money? So, for example, you know, many of the projects that we supported when I ran a program called Creative XR, one of the questions in the funding was, how are you going to distribute it and commercialize it? And really, shouldn't we be funding things like this for public good, for the sake of art, you know, for the sake of our communities? But we had to do that because it was a condition of the funding. So that was very sad, really, because there were pieces and very clever ideas around all sorts of social problems using immersive technology that would have been brilliant for people and those soft impacts, but they didn't get funded. So I think, what other kind of incentives can we offer in terms of, I don't know, partnerships, or I don't know what those answers are, but yeah, different incentives.
We need to measure success in a different way by the sounds of it, don't we? Yeah.
I think I completely agree with the statement. I think it's, you know, an existential crisis, obviously, and it's a very depressing topic. We talked about the burning platform before and about how hot does a burning platform have to be if it's so far in the future that you can't really see it or feel the heat. I think for me there's something about the first step. We all need to agree with the problem statement. I'm not sure that everyone on the globe agrees with that problem statement, and while we've got that as a status, how can we move forward as a society? So that's where I would start, is in these days of, you know, I used to be a journalist at the BBC, in this day of fake news, you know, media, AI, deepfakes, etc. How do you get to a point where everyone starts by agreeing the problem statement, and then we might be able to decide what we do about it?
So just one last little bit on that.
Yeah.
So one of my other hats is I'm just trustee of the Eden Project, and I grew up with Magnus Pyke. We were just talking about this. I grew up with Magnus Pyke, you know, Johnny Ball. So people who've made science, you know, accessible to the or maths accessible to the masses, and scientists are massively misunderstood, and they also quite often don't necessarily have the impact that they're having articulated back to them either. So, I mean, what we do at Eden, we're not scientists, so we take hard scientific fact. A lot of it's almost unintelligible. And we take it and we interpret it, and then we narrate it, and then we storytell it, and then we deliver it. And that can be through dance, it can be through sculpture, it can be through some kind of interactive exhibit. But that link between scientists and society is a challenge. I mean, go back to COVID, and everyone's saying we're following the scientists. They weren't following the scientists, and there was a massive disjoint there. The scientists knew what they were talking about, but trying to get the scientists and the politicians to actually have a common language of understanding. It's not that they both didn't want to do the right thing, it's just there was just a disjoint. So I think there's a big language piece to be worked on. Bring back Magnus Pyke.
Okay, I'm going to move. There was a lady up there, and then we'll have one more question afterwards. I've spotted you there.
Well, thank you so much. I'm a master's student. It was inspiring, and well, thank you for remembering all these wicked challenges we have ahead. My question links to the previous statement about, well, we know innovation is really expensive, and it has like two parts, the technical aspects and also the social collaboration, like collectively achieving these partnerships. What would you think is the hardest part? And linked to that question, it's, in your experience, what are quickly applied solutions that respond to market-oriented and social needs as well? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Who would like to start us off on this one?
So have a go at that.
Go on.
So I think we need to make sure that when we're talking about innovation, we're not accidentally talking about invention. Because innovation is the invention plus the deployment and the adoption. The hardest bit for me is the end piece, as I mentioned before. It is astonishing how, when things get into the wilds, there is an attempt to create reasons for saying no. Not invented here, it's different here because, etc., etc., etc. So how do you really get the benefits of a particular intervention or an impact? through universal use in a time period that actually makes it a worthwhile investment, I think is the biggest thing. I think in the UK, and again, this is a very health-centric answer, so I apologise for that, but one of the things that we're very poor at is, and I've just been at an NHS suppliers conference talking to industry leaders all day, by the time procurement decisions about particular innovative technologies get to a boardroom somewhere in the NHS, there's no postscript to the business case that points out what UK PLC has already spent on R&D, on various different grant fundings, etc., to get to that decision point. So as the UK, we're making collective decisions without realising the sunk costs on a particular intervention, and I think we need to absolutely have that more holistic view to, as the UK, we have already determined that we're going to invest in this particular thing. Actually, when it gets to a board, they need to have that whole investment proposition in front of them when they're making their decisions.
Yeah, I think it's both parts. I mean, because of the nature of living in a capitalist society, I don't know why I keep being an advocate for socialism, but you know, we're in this country, right? We're in a position where our debt is the size of our GDP. Last year we spent 100 billion on financing our debt. 100 billion. That's 5 times the research budget. It's considerably more than the education budget, just on paying interest on loans. Right? That's the state of our finance, our fiscal situation. Right? It's parlous. And unfortunately, that means that investment in tomorrow just goes to nothing. Right? And we see this in the venture capital market as well. It's all going to nothing. Everything's drying up because interest rates are high. So, you know, financing is a big issue, but equally, the sort of social side is just as and I talk about climate change. You know, we know it's a big deal. We have COP every year. We always set targets, and then in 2023 we spent more on fossil fuel subsidies than ever before, right? Despite knowing it's such a big deal, governments, including ours, by the way, were spending huge sums of money on subsidising gas because the gas price is high. People need to heat their homes. They put an energy cap in, and you know, we probably all benefited from that in that we didn't pay money on more than we would have done on gas, but it's not the bloody solution, right? So, you know, it's when times are tough, that takes real bravery to say, well, actually, that's the wrong answer. It's the easy answer, but it's the wrong answer. And you know, collectively, socially, we're not brave enough.
I just want to pick up on that point about bravery, and I think that, you know, it's also expensive to bring everyone on the journey with you, and to have this innovation and access to innovation be equitable across the whole of the UK. And I think that, you know, there's been steps to help that, but it's still not equitable at all. So I think that, you know, there's got to be a bravery about that as well, saying, okay, if we're going to move forward, we need to take everyone with us.
Okay, we've got time for one last question. So the lady here.
Thank you very much. It was very enlightening, and the questions as well. And my question for the panel is there an example that you can think of, or that you're proud of, or that inspires you for the future, where government, academia, and the private sector have come together to successfully deliver an innovation for the public good?
Okay, let's end on an optimistic note, people.
Hopefully.
Success. Where have we seen examples that we want to replicate and follow? Oh no.
Find success how you like.
Any thoughts?
Well, infrastructure always is good because basically it makes more jobs. People create a different type of network, if it's transportation or it's a power or creating even hospitals. All of these infrastructure brings people together when they are making something. And usually when you're creating a new infrastructure, you think what it looks like in terms of innovation. So you are more open to adapt a new thing rather than sticking on the old part where you're just keep doing what you do every single day. So when there is a big type of project which is bringing everybody in, definitely it benefits, and everybody benefits from that project. But I think one of the things which is the lady mentioned there, if there is a problem that all of us could come in and solve CO2, but we would benefit from it collectively, and it could have a reward that will be really, or net zero, whatever. I don't agree with net zero naming. I know it's balance itself, but we need CO2 because we need to have a green, we need to have plants, and but the balancing of what's in, what's out, and there are other solutions, which is, I think, currently we are not adapting. Like we haven't used the sea. There is so much the sea that can take actually of that CO2, and that's not being even kind of used in terms of research. And people's like, oh, well, there is, certain creatures or certain plants, and we can use these parts to actually circulate. But we need a big project that everybody. So, for example, Crossrail, I think it was benefit for everybody. It was where public sectors came in, private sectors came in, government as well, which has happened to the good for the people. Unfortunately, HS2 didn't work out that way, but but I think kind of collectively, if you have a big project and big infrastructure, it usually helps all the sectors.
I think I would say very simply the COVID vaccine.
Yeah, so that the right things coming together and the pressure driving that at that time,
And I think from my perspective, it's definitely all of the investment that the government's made in the creative industries throughout the country, on facilities, and also on pairing that with national infrastructure like 5G, and really kind of thinking, okay, how can this 5G infrastructure be used by creatives? How can better internet and fibre be used to help people work remotely in creative jobs? So all of that work, I think, has been really good because it's involved universities, it's involved local economic partnerships, it's involved local authorities and SMEs and individual creatives as well. So, they've done a pretty good job. There's always more to do, but very proud of all the work that I've been involved with.
Come on, I'll say something positive about climate change. I'll give you a positive story. About 15 years ago, the government decided that we're a small windy island with a shallow seabed. Surely we should do a lot of offshore wind. And we're now the biggest offshore wind producer in Europe. And in large part, that was driven by government intervention, right? They set up the contracts for difference. It allowed companies to be able to invest and know that they were going to get a return. You saw companies respond to that. And actually some really brave company decisions like Ørsted. Ørsted came from Dong, an oil and gas company. And they sold all of their very profitable oil and gas assets and decided to become a wind company. That's a brave thing in a boardroom to do that. You've got a profitable business. We're going to leap into something that might make us a huge loss. Some people do brave things. And, the government have invested in research and there's now a thriving ecosystem there. So that's great. And lots of jobs and more equitable. They're all around the country. So that's a really good story.
Adam.
And again, a shameless plug, but also, I guess it's a latent intervention. We were given £50 million of levelling up money, we being Eden, to build Eden Project North, which is going to be in Morecambe. Eden is about regeneration. Morecambe needs regenerating, for sure. And the rest of the money that's backing that project is private. As a public-private initiative, we're really quite excited about it. But the longevity part of that I'm excited about more so is that every Eden that we build has a focus on something. So, for example, Eden Cornwall, its messaging is around the importance of plants. We have an Eden that not many people know about in Qingdao in China. The message there is the importance of water. And again, it's next to one of the major estuaries of a river lined with industry. And Eden Morecambe is all about natural rhythms, so both nature's rhythms and our rhythms, and how to get us back in sync with ourselves and with nature, and how that can lead us to live healthier, happier, more fulfilled lives. So I'm hoping that when I come back here, hopefully if I come back here, if you have me back here, that I can say I was right and it was a successful intervention, but at the moment it's a latent one.
On that hopeful note, I'm going to bring things to a close. It's been a really fascinating discussion, and I'd like now to hand over to Professor Kieran Gibson, Head of the School of Physics, Engineering and Technology.
So I'm the head of the school at the moment, and I've been around since we brought it together, and it's really exciting. I really would like to thank the panel. I've really enjoyed the expertise that they've brought and the different experiences that they've brought through. Sorry, I'm turning my back on you. It was fascinating to see the different perspectives and across such a broad range of disciplines. And also thank you actually to you, the audience, because I think it came out in the questions about one of the really important things, which is that this isn't just about bringing together disciplines of physics and engineering, it's actually about so much more. And I think it raises a lot of questions about what our education at York means and what our graduates should be able to do, to be able to engage not just with the technical science and the technical engineering, but actually to be able to articulate that and to be able to understand how that fits in with government and society. And I think if we're going, as a university for public good, we've got to be part of educating that pipeline of people who are going to be able to take some of the ideas that you've spoken about and really develop them. So thanks to lots of people. Thanks to the events organisers, of course, the events team who've done a fantastic job in arranging this. Thanks to you, the audience, and again, thanks to the panel for all they've done, and to you, Kate, for comparing so well. The evening is not over, so there are nibbles and drinks outside, and I'd encourage you all to go around and look at the stands and see some of the exciting things, the exciting pieces of research we're doing, particularly in the translational areas that we're focusing on, but also some of the things that our students do in terms of their education programs, in terms of their outreach. It's all there out in the atrium, and so please go and enjoy yourselves, network, have a look around and see what it is that the school is all about. Thanks again.